Ooh, hello, hello, beautiful humans, and welcome there, better, to another edition of Erotic Lessons, my podcast for my nonprofit, Eros Spirituality Center. I am your host, Queen, Miss Queen, beautiful human, tender person, clinical somatic sexologist, and also embodied wellness coach. And let me tell you how I almost got it fucked up. I almost got it fucked up, y'all. I had to realize when I go back to look at some of these videos, I was like, oh my God, I am so deeply into um a trauma response, especially the last two ones, because the last two episodes, because I was figuring out whether or not to do this video thing. And then recognizing that we are in this age of interest and attention economy, I was like, there's really nothing for me to be scared of. But I had to recognize that that's where I was. And so, Erotic Lessons is really to talk about our embodiment with self worth, desirability, with embodied safety and trust, and the politics of it all. And I use the professional, what was called in social work, the professional use of the self, where I therapeutically share parts of myself to provide lessons, insights, to help others really normalize that we are souls in a human existence and that you're not alone. And so, what I also had to realize too is that there are a lot more people who want to see me win in the sense of not capitalistic, like win or lose, but in a sense of the quality of life and in body safety that I have been working so hard to reclaim. And that's what this space is for. This space is for us to reclaim our connection to wholeness through embodied safety and self-trust. And like that's how we become intuitive. And for myself, that is how I became intuitive, not not performative. I'm intuitive, not performative. And so when I realized I've been performing, I was like, oh shit. And so this podcast is the reclamation to being intuitive and not performative. We have too much going on in our life to figure out whether or not we're being authentic. And I'm doing this because I authentically want to. I am coming from a place of my desire, not because a coach or otherwise has told me these are the things that I need to do as I move from being a traditional therapist to being back to being a digital nomad, back to being someone who is accessible, but in ways that understand to be accessible, that feels safe for me. And so make sure you do continue to like, share, and subscribe, right? And take the erotic confidence self-assessment to find out which erotic care plan is right for you, because these are ways in which we can stay in relationship together. And I can do this in a space and place that is also good for me. Um, and so, yeah, welcome to Erotic Lessons. The erotic is the energy of desirability sexually and non sexually. But because we have been socialized to see the erotic only in pornographic ways, we do not have permission to access all the liberatory ways in which the erotic actually shows up in our life. And it does show up in our life every day. Anytime I talk about the difference between sexuality, sexuality, and sexual, I can already tell from people's responses about how fear and shame actually show up. And so this is our time to take 30 minutes to really reclaim our connection to our wholeness, recognizing that the erotic is something that has been given to us ancestrally, that we are here because our ancestors tapped into understanding their desires, regardless of what other people told them they had a right to tap into. I think for me, that is what is so powerful about embodied liberation is no one can give you permission to be free. You have to give that to yourself. And you give that permission in ways that also feel safe for you. And so when we come from our relationships, upbringing, things of that nature, and I also, to caveat, I am 51 years old. I know today, the hair cover, y'all can't see the grain, but I'm 51. And so I think also too, my insight from this very Thundercat crone space is also very nuanced. I know today I said we're going to go ahead and talk about desirability and fat phobia because of what has been going on with Cardi B and how desirability politics does show up in both our in pop culture and how pop culture impacts us or our personal life, right? Let's talk about how it shows up in our personal life, but in it also shows up in politics, how desirability politics are really informing, are driving everything. But particularly, we see it, I think, so much. The majority of society sees it now, but when I think when you are a person of African descent or a person from the global majority, we have always seen desirability politics because it has informed so much of our ability to access peace, pleasure, prosperity with ease and without penalty from energy that's infinite and unobstructedly flowing. When we understand in our body that every day we are rejecting desirability politics of racism, of fat phobia, of assumed Christianity, of classism, right? And how those things show up, even in the choices of the partners. I was going to turn right here like somebody was here. Nobody's here. But even in how we choose our partners, right? Particularly with cisgender men, partners are seen as someone who is supposed to elevate your status, your manhood, your masculinity, your virility. And for female identified folks and women, it is supposed to be about our ease in which we move through life that is always attached to labor. So I digress. So let's zoom in a little bit. Today I'm going to be reading Belly of the Beast by Deshaun Harrison, The Politics of Anti-Blackness, Anti-Fatness as Anti-Blackness. Because I use the erotic self, which comes from sexological research of Dr. Tracy Gilbert, that looks at the 8 different areas of the Black person's lived experience that says, how do we access sexy? Understanding your relationship to anti-racism that is all and anti-Blackness is paramount in this. And so for white folks who support and who are doing this work, it is, what is your relationship to anti-Black racism? And how does that inform your relationship to desirability? I remember, and I may have shared this in an earlier podcast, how at Sex Down South, there was a workshop on decolonizing pleasure, right? Decolonizing sexuality. And one of the caveats of that conversation was no one was talking about their relationship to unpacking racism and anti-Blackness. It was all rooted in this place of like, how do we access pleasure? But for me, what I wasn't hearing is, what were you unpacking about pleasure? Because part of the rites of passage when it comes to pleasure and sexiness and desirability is understanding your relationship to Black womanhood. Period. And it's evident in everything that we do. It's evident in how the Kardashians have literally become billionaires because of anti-Blackness and desirability politics that is informed by Black womanhood. It is in how people have fillers and injections and melanated and colorism, like it's texturism, right? And who has access to braiding hair and who had this, like all those things, those nuances are important, particularly if you're in it, especially if you're in an interracial relationship. But it's important because if you have access to Black folks, you need to be very mindful of how your anti-Blackness is showing up, because proximity doesn't eliminate you from racism, anti-Black racism, and desirability. So in Deshawn's book, page 34, it says, in fact, for race to be constructed, the slave had to exist. It had to exist as the antithesis of health, so that European physicians, anthropologists, and other eugenics could determine what set the slave apart, as J.F. Blumenbach called them, the Caucasian, and that the degeneration or corruption of the slave body from the Caucasian, right? And so there had to be opposites. And so white, what is the opposite of white? Why do you say Black? Where did you learn that the opposite of white is Black? Is it true? Or did someone tell you it was true and so you didn't question the truth? That's how anti-Blackness shows up. For all intents and purposes, Blumenbach created race and did so to differentiate the human from the slave, instead of holding the human accountable for enslavement of another human. There had to be a degradation and a devaluing of Black existence. Capiche? We understand? All right. All right. Moving on. Page 35. And there's more. Cartwright, Samuel Cartwright, who was a physician, I believe, or a scientist, deemed Black folks as psychologically abnormal and inept, and so gave birth to pretty much medical apartheid based in scientific racism. And so, and then now, so you have Blackness, now you have to understand too how fatness and anti-fatness also showed up, because there was a point in European history in which fatness was actually the symbolism of wealth, because if you had access in excess, you gained weight. You had access to food, you had access to leisure and other people who could do things for you. And so that became a status symbol of wealth. But enter American chattel slavery, and all of that actually changed. But Deshawn goes on to say the belly or fatness is yet another reason why the beast or the Black can and never will have access to health. In Fearing the Black Body, I have that book as well, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia, Sabrina Springs masterfully details how fatness on the Black body, the Black subject body set the precedent for how fatness would be engaged in the United States and the world as a whole. Fatness, once seen as something to aspire to and attractive was once seen, and I just talked about that. This is the reason, however, that at the time fatness was signified a social, political, and economic power. And so when Europeans saw Africans for the first time, they saw bodies that looked like them, but their skin did not. It is then that anti-fatness was established as a coherent ideology, because what Europeans were trying to do was not only set themselves apart, but set themselves as superior. And so when you think about how desirability politics actually shows up, it shows up rooted in anti-Blackness and anti-fatness. In my work and in my own personal self, like therapeutic use of the self, right? I grew up the skinny kid, and the skinny kid who also had big titties. Not big, honestly, they weren't even big. It was just grown-ass men who were making inappropriate fucking comments about a young girl who was going through puberty. So I digress. I mean, I don't digress. I reframed that. I did not have big titties. I was being sexualized by grown-ass fucking men. Now, at 50 years old, I have them because menopause weight said, bitch, let me help you out. And so what I also know about my body, and when you get into relationship with your body, right, your teens, your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and like I said, I'm in my 50s, you're going to have a different relationship to the messages and to the acceptance about your skin color, about your body size and your body type, and how that informs your understanding of your self-worth. And so using the erotic, decolonizing the erotic, and understanding the erotic as the energy, ancestral energy of desirability, both sexually and non-sexually. Like, you have an ancestral right, a human right to feel desirable. And no matter what body, a body that can walk, a body that cannot walk, a body that can hear, a body that cannot hear, a body that can talk, a body that cannot talk, right? You have the right. Speaking of, where are my captions? My apologies about that. You have a right to feel desirable in the body that you're in. And so, with healing the erotic self, with the erotic lessons that I have learned and that we're going to continue to process, we're going to reclaim our relationship to feeling desirable, no matter what space that we're in. We're not going to allow corporate spaces to take away our understanding of our desirability. We're not going to allow public spaces to take away our relationship to feeling desirable and worthy. We're not going to allow family spaces to take away, church spaces to take away, people who don't know us and have an understanding or avatar in our heads when we were 12 and not who we are right now, take away our relationship to desirability. We're not going to allow our abusers to take away our relationship to our desirability. We are going to be in relationship to our desirability, and we are going to be the ones to reclaim our relationship to desirability. Stop asking for other people's permission for you to be great. And I think that's what I was struggling with. And so as I move from this place of wounded to empowered, very much so understanding who I am in the space and place that I am, understanding who I am as a human being, as a spiritualist, as an erotic person, this is about how we reclaim our erotic power, regardless of our relationship status. Regardless of our income level. Remember 2 years ago or a year ago, that shadow workbook was around. How's that going? Because shadow is not a bad thing. Again, we've been taught that there is this difference between, there's this polar difference about bad and good and evil, right? Black and white. I remember someone asked me to look at their gender presentation, and they had this dichotomy of all these things, and it was absolutely rooted in white supremacy, but didn't understand that it was a white cisgender lesbian who didn't understand, like, by asking me that, and I just met you, I don't know if you're safe or not. And so coercively I gave her what she needed, but absolutely positively, because that wasn't safe, there was nothing I can do with that. I know what I'm doing with it now, right? But like, we have often been taught, and we never challenged what we've been taught. One of the reasons why I became a sex therapist was because I understood that my spiritual self and my relationship to God was solid. But what I was being taught about what my relationship to God should be was not solid. And I absolutely rejected those teachings that said that my sexual self and my spiritual self were somehow in conflict, because US chattel slavery informs our biblical understanding of the self in ways that continue to harm us and that people want to revert to this very day. Desirability politics is Project 2025, and I heard this morning it has been 50% actualized, and we're 7 months in to this new administration. Now, with this new administration and what people don't know, who feel insecure about their relationship to their self-worth, about the things that they feel like they should be entitled to and don't have access to, is that they have no authority over telling someone what their worth is. They should be working on their own worth and leaving other people the hell alone. And we're going to continue to do our parts to disrupt, to fight fascism that says in our families, in our legal system, in our political system, that says that somehow we don't have worth. We do. You do. And I need you to say that today. I have worth. How does that feel in your body? Are you mindful of how you're receiving messages and how you're internalizing those messages? Are you creating space from those messages so that way you can reject? Do you realize that your body is signaling to you what your spirit needs? This is the work that I do. This is the work that I offer. Whether it's through a masterclass, whether it's through my print or digital books, whether that is from the social media content that I share, it is about you being able to somatically create safety in your body, mind, body, spirit, and energy. I should say integratively, but mind, body, spirit, and energy. So that way you feel somatically safe with your yes, no's, or maybes. And so these erotic lessons, I want you to lean into with erotic curiosity. Be willing to explore. Be willing to try. Be willing. Be curious. Because I think from curious, willingness comes. And you can go slow. You don't have to go fast. And so that's what Erotic Lessons is about. Pay attention to how you're using the erotic in your decision making, not just in what you wear. And that's not superficial, but I want you to deeply pay attention. I want you to think about censoring not what folks have done to you. I want you to think about what you can do for yourself. This is how we move and we reclaim. We move from wounded to empowered. We move from trauma narrative to healing narrative because we start to center our desires. And so I want to encourage you and continue to encourage you to center your desires. Your desires, again, don't come from a superficial place. They are the needs that are required in order for you to thrive. That's what a desire is. It's a need that is required in order for you to thrive. Tap into your desires. Be curious about where they take you. And that's what we're going to do today for Erotic Lessons. It's your 30 minutes self-care moment to disrupt self-doubt, disrupt shame, disrupt your ability to self-sabotage, because you're going to be doing things from a place of self-pleasure. So, thank you for joining me. Again, like, share, subscribe, comment below, and let me know how you're doing. If you have a question you want me to answer, please send that to support@lenaqueen.com. You definitely can make sure you check out my masterclasses that are coming up at the end of the week. I'm going to continue with erotic affirmations on Instagram, Healing the Erotic Self, and Sister Sexologist. And so until next time, I will talk to y'all on Wednesday live here on YouTube. 12:30 Eastern Daylight Time. You know the difference between Eastern Standard and Eastern Daylight. Anyway, I digress. And you gotta take good care of yourselves intentionally. Until next time, peace and love.